Can you hear me now at all? Can anyone hear me at all? Let me just. Okay, cool. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for that. Like I said, I'm not sure what I put into this new little microphone here, and I appreciate the heads up because I would have had no idea. I've been saying nothing for the past 2 minutes, basically. So I appreciate that. I'm going to kind of start this over a little bit so everyone can kind of hear what I was saying. But basically, like I said, I have some questions already set up here for people who have asked me over on LinkedIn. Some questions that they've mentioned over the past week that I've written down. And of course, if any questions come up on any of your guys' end, feel free to chat it in the box. And I would love to get to it towards the middle or the end of this stream. So the first thing I was trying to talk about was networking tactics. And I've had many people ask me, they understand how to network with people, but they don't really know some of the tactics that or could be used to actually land a job. And if you know me, what I talk about over on LinkedIn, that networking is probably the best tactic nowadays to get a data job, especially with the how the market is being oversaturated and so many people with similar resumes and projects. So I'll explain at least from like my perspective on what I did with networking to help land my jobs, and hopefully this will work for you. But of course, as I tell other people, there's many different ways to get a job. So just because someone does it one way does not mean it could work for you, and it just always, like I said, will depend. Um, but for me, the easiest way for the networking was looking for posts online. I think having a solid LinkedIn profile, even if you don't have a ton of connections or followers, that doesn't mean your profile isn't, in my opinion, appropriate, right? Just making sure you're posting every once in a while, a good profile picture, a nice filled out experience section, education if you have a bachelor's background. Make sure you have a nice full profile is, of course, important. If you don't have that, no matter what, even if you have any connections or not, it's not going to be the best use of the platform. So being able to find posts and then putting it together a nice personalized message, making sure I'm really paying attention to a person's profile, pointing out anything that's really specific to their background or something I find interesting, and try and use that personal connection to get to at least the interview stage is good. Because you understand with all these like networking tactics, it's all about getting the interview. Once you get the interview, you're pretty much on your own. Like anything you do in the interview process is all dictated by you mostly. Whether you do good or bad, you're the one that controls it. Um, Also, for getting the interviews, it's the same thing as trying to get referrals. I think that referrals are something that not a lot of people look towards. A lot of people like to use LinkedIn to um, go right to the hiring manager or the recruiter. And while that's fine, they get a tons of messages every single day. So I like to do, at least for me, when I have my current job at Cigna, is I went online and I went towards people who had Cigna jobs, people who were in the data part of Cigna that were working at either the building I'm at or elsewhere. And I want to just chat with them. I never asked for a referral yet or anything. I was just wanting to be like, hey, so I profile, I see you work at Cigna. I'm currently, interviewing for them, or I'm currently, just apply for them and would love to like learn more about your experiences. And in that area, I'm not asking anything from them right away. I'm just asking of them of their experiences. And I don't know about you, but when people ask questions about me, I I like it. I like when people ask questions because, of course, I would like to talk about my experiences and how I feel about things. It feels good when people want to know your opinion on something. So, when it comes to this, make sure you're focusing on the conversation and focusing on the person before yourself is always most important. And throughout time, once you start getting more comfortable, whether it be a day, two, or three, when you feel comfortable enough to ask them for that referral, that's how you go about it. So it's something that doesn't happen immediately, but with more practice and understanding that it is a little bit of a numbers game. That sometimes you might reach out to someone and have good conversation and doesn't lead anywhere. That just happens sometimes. But there are some times where you meet the right person at the right time and they can really help you out. So I really think that putting in that work for referrals, it might not happen right away. It might not happen at all, but it's something that definitely could help you out because once you get that referral, puts you at the top of the pile for recruiters or the hiring managers to see, and it's just as good as reaching out to a recruiter. So it takes a little bit of work, but obviously you have to have a lot of things figured out. You got to know the company you're looking for, the type of job you're looking for. Make sure you're focused on the right people to reach out to. A lot more goes into it, but of course, even if you have a conversation that doesn't lead to anything, and this has happened actually, I went to have a conversation with someone for a job at a company I was applying for. Turned out that they were actually leaving that company to go take another position, but they're like, hey, like, if you ever need anything in the future, let me know. And that person actually did help me get a job at the company that they went to. So just because it doesn't happen right away, build on that connection, because you don't really know where I could go. Always think the long term, not so much of the short term with that. Um, Another networking tactic, should I say, is aside from just content, because people think like, oh, if you post, like, oh, that's gonna be the best way to get noticed, and that's actually very, very false. That's probably the second or third way best way to get noticed. I like to really comment on people's posts, trying to, and this is like anything I was doing when I didn't really have much of following. I would have a list of 8 to 12 different data creators that were very active. That I feel like, okay, if I comment on their posts and I show my insights to either agree with them or add it to someone else who commented, one, I'll be able to grow my network a little bit better, and two, hopefully get noticed by that person. And like I said, that's something that the more people you meet, and as long as you have a proper agenda with what you're trying to do, which is very important. And I try to always make sure there's like two groups of people. One group are people who are like-minded professionals, people who are in the same position as me, who also want to get a data job, but they're mainly also there for support, because I want to make sure that, when you're going through the process, it can be really, I don't know about you guys, but it can be really mentally draining and exhausting, and you feel like you're on your own. But if you have a group of people who are in the same situation as you, people that you could support each other with, you could support their content, you could support when they're going through interviews. It just could lead to so many great things and make you feel like you're not alone in the data journey. On the other side, you have your other group of people being hiring managers, um, recruiters, data professionals. Those are the kind of people that are a little more strategic. Those are the people that you're engaging with their work. It's a little mix of, yes, you want to get to know them, but of course you're trying to get a job. And then also with them is you're going to approach them, like I said, basically a little bit different. You're not going to be so close and personal with the first group. The second group is more strategic with everything that you're doing. So I always recommend to people that I talk with who are beginning their journey or trying to figure out how to find those networking opportunities. It's really trying to make sure that every single approach you have with any connection, it's strategic. There's always a reason between everyone you're talking to, whether they're a person who is trying to break in or a person who has 5-10 years of experience in data. Making sure that there's a purpose with what you're doing with them will make you feel a lot more successful in your process. So, we got, let's do a question. We got Travis with a question here. To answer, why are you looking to leave your current company and position? That's a good one. I've had to answer that a few times in the last handful of months. Like I said, I think that there's a few factors go into it. I'll at least say mine and my answer to it. So for the recent one, I was at my first data job for about 7-8 months at LPL Financial, Fortune 500 company. Nothing but good experience there. It was great. I appreciated the amount of time and effort they put into me there. I just realized that long term, I did not see the most growth and opportunity. And that kind of led to my response when Cigna asked, like, okay, you've been at that job for 7-8 months. Like, why are you trying to leave already? Especially this is like your first data analytic job. Why are you trying to leave? And I said to them, like, I'd rather be in a company, be in a position where I could grow more and not get very stuck or plateaued in my growth. And I think that is a very valid reason for anything. And I think people would rather see someone who wants to take themselves out of a situation instead of just sitting around for a year or two just because. Just because I want to stay for a year or two, I don't want my resume to look bad. Like, no. If a company's going to give you a chance, then you go with that. That's what I said to myself when I'm like, okay, I'm in the shop for 7-8 months. I don't know if I should leave or not because people say, oh, be in a job for a year or two before you look. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let the market do the talking. And if people really care that much that I've only been there for 7, 8 months, then okay, then I guess I'll stay a little bit. Um, so I really think if you have a solid reason, it can really show off really well in your interview. If you go in there and you start lying about like, oh, why do you want to leave? And your real reason is you want more, let's say, compensation, and you're like, I really like the direction of this company and blah blah. If you're kind of making up some random answer just to make him feel good, it's gonna look pretty generic and robotic in your response. Um, so I really think it's a mixture of being realistic and your reason, but also make sure you can back it up. Because if you know look for a job and you're coming from, let's say it is your first job. Let's go back and let's say this is your first job or second one, and they're asking why you're leaving your current company. If you're trying to break into data, that's easy. Like you're just trying to make a career change, and you feel like this is the right position for you, for your growth and career. Like that's easy. I think that's fine. If you're doing it and this is gonna be like your second job, there's a lot of factors. You gotta look to see, okay, how long have you been at that job? If you've been there for a few years, that's once again not that hard of an answer. You really could be, um, I've been there for a few years, not making much growth, and I want to be, I want a new challenge, new company. That's not bad. I think it only gets difficult if you've been in a position that you haven't been in for a very long time. If you haven't been in there for a long time, that can get very difficult because you really got to make sure that you're looking at your history. If you've been at jobs for 6, 7 months over and over and over again, naturally they're gonna, assume, right? But if for me, I was a teacher and I worked in baseball industry for a little bit. Then I was at a job for 7, 8 months. They might think, okay, this guy's like went from 3 different industries in 4 or 5 years. He's been at this first job for 7 months. What's going on, right? But if they're interviewing you already, like they already like your background, they already like your resume. So you already made it past that point. You know what I mean? Like if you're not getting responses, that's one thing. But if you're getting interviews and they don't really care that much about your resume history, they like what they see. So as long as you could be realistic and back up what you're saying, that's all really matters. It just will vary on your position and what you're really going for. But I always like to focus on saying more about, current company, feeling pretty plateaued. I want more growth. I think that could work for 99% of any situation. Um, if you're switching from social media marketing to data analytics, that's a good one. It's a really good one. And honestly, seeing how marketing data is put together, I find, and I know this, my fiance works actually in social media marketing, and I see what she works with, and there's lots of data involved with everything you do. There's a lots of data that could get involved with that. Um, so if you're switching industries, well, one, I think like right away, just what I said before, if you're switching industries, it's definitely something that is to video game industry. Ooh, video game industry. That'd be great. I know a couple people who were in the video game industry and data analytics. Um, it's super cool. Like I see some of the work that they do. It's really intriguing, especially I mean with how video games are nowadays in the industry itself. It's growing so much in the last 5, 7 years. I mean, data is a huge point to everything that they do in that industry. But I mean, if you're switching like from industry like social media marketing to data analytics, I feel like it's a pretty straightforward one. Where it's like, I've been working with data for many years. I mean, I have lots of experience in social media marketing, and I want to transition all my knowledge of data and into more data analytics. I think that's a very good career transition. It's not like you're going from me, like I said, I was a teacher to data analytics, and while yes, I taught math, and yes, I know math is a small part of data. It's not you don't have to be a math wizard to do data analytics. I came from a non-tech background or a non-corporate job to data analytics. So it was a big difference, coming from sitting in a classroom all day, barely only time I'd go on a computer was to input student data or grades. So it was very different going from a job where I was on my feet for 7, 8 hours a day to on sitting in a chair all day. So it's definitely very different, and I think that sometimes people come from that non-corporate or desk-like background. It definitely could be a struggle, or some jobs might be like, hey, like we have a person who was a nurse. Do they want to become a data analyst? Like it's a lot different. So if you're coming from a position that was more corporate driven, I feel like that definitely gets more reasonable for the reasons why someone wants to make that move. So I think that's actually a pretty good um, career choice there. Um, Another thing I was asked is why did I choose data analytics more than anything? Because I definitely that's something that's very interesting because it was not my first choice for what I wanted to do. It was like this time. It was in August last year. August last year, I told myself that I love teaching, but it's just not what I want to do. Like I can't do it for the rest of my life. I just saw, um, at least coming for me to be realistic, like I don't come from money. I never, not that I like really needed it, but I just saw how my life was going, what we wanted to do as a family, and I'm like, you know what, teaching was a huge mental toll on me, just a lot. And I feel like I could not do it for the rest of my life. There's no way I could do it. I could probably do it for another 5, 10 years, and then I don't want to make a career change that far into teaching. So I'm like, okay, what could I do that could utilize my math abilities or anything like that? I'm like, okay, well, I saw like software development, and I'm like, okay, let me try that. And I tried coding a little bit in like Java and stuff like that, and it was fine. It didn't click in my brain though. I feel like it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So then when I found out data analytics was an actual like career, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally this is like perfect. This is literally like I work with data in teaching. I played baseball my whole life through college. Like I've been around data for so much of my life. I didn't know that you could actually make that a career. Um, so the more I looked into it, I found a Google certificate and looked into that, and I'm like, I can make this a career, and I'm sure that's how a lot of people feel that way too. Is they start taking that course or some other courses, and start working with data, and it's really fulfilling when you could actually learn something like that, especially if you're trying to make a career change. So that was one thing I did is I actually started in software development, realized that wasn't meant for me. Now I'm in data analytics, and I feel truthfully that's the most perfect fit for any career I could have ever chosen. And I'm very grateful for trying out software development because that definitely was not going to be good for me. Um, what industries did I consider? So for me, I initially, when I was looking last year, I wanted to be more of it in the finance industry. I come from my dad's side family. My grandpa ran in an accounting firm, so I've definitely been around finance a lot of my life. I feel like I understand the data well enough. And my first company I worked at was a financial company, so I was fortunate with that. But I realized too, I'm like, okay, well, finance and financial data is available like almost at any industry. Like right now at Cigna, I work with financial data. So while I'm at a healthcare company, I'm working with financial data. So I realized that too. I'm like, okay, I don't have to work at a financial company to work with financial data. I could do it almost at any company. Um, I was fairly open to industry. I did want to focus on industries that were more secure, like financial, healthcare, anything that really, no matter what, even if something happened really bad and layoffs happen and whatnot, that my industry would probably be the most secure. So that's kind of why I also want to get into healthcare because I'm like, okay, well, healthcare is something that I could be in. I could be in for a very long time. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity because wherever my career takes me, I feel like I want to stay in healthcare for some time. Um, but yeah, I was fairly open because, like I said, a year ago I was a teacher. Like I was making like $40,000, and I know money's not everything, but I was like, you know what? Like, I'm pretty sure almost any any job that involves data analytics, if they want to give me a job, like I'll like take it. I'm not gonna be very picky. Um, there wasn't really any industry I was not open to. I was just like, okay, as long as it's a good opportunity, if it's good company, and it's a good position, like I'll take it. And that's what I encourage people to do too. As long as if you're coming from a position like me where you're underpaid, undervalued, not so much appreciated, like you should be fairly open because coming at least from my point of view and my journey, once you get that first job, like things move very quickly. Like I like I said, if I even if I wasn't looking for a job, if I was at my first job still right now, I know that my experience would go a long way. So once you get that first job and get that experience on your resume, I'm telling you, it makes a massive, massive difference to your career. Um, Ever applied for a job because of your remote benefits, but as you go through the interview stage, you realize that they offered hybrid? Okay, yeah. That's a very common thing I've been seeing in the last year. Is that you'll see companies say, especially on LinkedIn, you type in like remote, you go through your application, you get to the end, it says hybrid, or you get to the interview process and like, oh, does a hybrid job? Yeah, I mean they do that just so they can get people to apply, and there's no real way to get past that. Um, it just sucks. I mean, there's no great way about it. One thing though I've seen that's good is if I see a job that's hybrid, I'm almost gonna go the opposite way. Because like my current job is it said hybrid. When I applied, it said it was a hybrid job, but it didn't really give any info. And I looked online and it said Cigna was still a remote company, but they're slowly bringing people back to the office. So I'm like, you know what? It seems to be that this situation might be pretty flexible. So I got the interview process. They're like, hey, we don't really have a plan yet, but we expect to go back to the office in September. And this is back in June. And I'm like, okay, so how many times a week are we looking at? They're like, oh, we're thinking 1 or 2 days a week. I'm like, okay, so right away I could tell that this is not a set situation. I feel like this could be negotiable. So I'm like, okay, I live pretty far from the office. How about we do like once every 2 weeks? I'm like, okay. They're like, yeah, sounds good. So it's like, okay, so it's like I learned right there. I'm like, okay, that this situation is not so dead set. That they said hybrid, but I'm home 90% of the time. Right. Like to me, like, yes, technically I have to go in the office every few weeks. But to me, that does feel like more of a remote job. Most of my work is done at home. Um, that's one thing. Make sure that if you ever see a posting that says remote, just do, and if you're unsure about it, just do a quick Google search onto the company. And hopefully, if they're large enough, you'll be able to get an idea. A one website, it's called Fishbowl. If you use Fishbowl, like you'll get to see employees of the company be able to talk about certain things that they saw, and that's how I found out about Cigna. I looked up Fishbowl, Cigna, RTO, Return to Office, and then when I did that, I saw people saying like, "Oh yeah, we expect to go back September. We think it's be 1 or 2 days a week." So it confirmed everything that they were saying. So I felt like I wasn't getting lied to. I felt like I did my research and I confirmed that yes, that is true. That they do plan on going back to the office, in September, 1 or 2 days a week. I'm like, okay, all checks out. They're not lying to me or anything like that. And it's been really good since then. So I think that, you know, there are lots of postings I've seen that say remote. You get to the interview process and it's like, oh, actually, we're not remote, we're hybrid. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't trust now, even if this is a good opportunity, I don't know if I can trust you guys. So it's it's tough, especially now in this market. It's remote opportunities are definitely getting a little bit less. And the market, the average rate now for data analysts from an entry level perspective is definitely a little bit lower than it was earlier this year, even last year. So companies are trying to do any tactic to get more applications, more people to interview, and people probably to settle. People like, hey, like I want a remote job, but now we're hybrid, but they want to give me an opportunity. So it's just a way to get more applications in there. And it's not a good tactic, and I always try to make sure I keep notes of any company who try to do that. So in case I ever see a posting, I try to tell people who apply for it. I just give them a heads up, like, hey, just let you know you're looking at this. I keep little tabs of companies that do that stuff. Um, so yeah, unfortunately, like I said, there's no really way around that. That's something though too that I tell people when they're looking at jobs. It's like you should have a list of necessities, like no non-negotiable things, like your working situation. If you're someone that has to work remote, whether it be for health reasons or family reasons, like I know people have 3 or 4 kids that they can't send them off to daycare. They have to stay home, or else they have to spend God knows how much money they have to spend on that. So they need a remote job, or else it's actually not worth it. So I tell them, like, if you need that, then stick with it. Like you don't have to be like, oh, like the people say, oh, be open to hybrid, be open to on site. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like me, I don't have kids. So yes, I could be more open to things that aren't so remote focused. But for some people who have health issues or have families, like they can't do that. They have to stick to their non-negotiables, which is, remote Or if they need, hey, like I need to make at least 75,000. I need it. If I make less than that, things can be difficult. Okay, if that's non-negotiable, then you got to make sure you work your butt off to get that number. That's it. That's all it is. I feel like people should have values and respect it, whether it be your compensation, your benefits, or working conditions. Like if you have that set, that's fine. Like you should not have to be like, hey, like I can't get a job. I'm gonna do an on-site job. I gotta put my kids now daycare and do this. It's like no, like if that's a problem, then there's other solutions for now. And I think that comes into a way different discussion, way more personalized conversation where it's more like, hey, if you gotta take another job just to keep things going, that's fine. But never ever go against your non-negotiables. So always make sure you have a list of that to um, make sure you're in a good position. How can a job remotely while in Africa? Now that is something that now if you're talking about more getting a remote job here, like say in the United States and you're out of the country, I mean just from the connections I've talked to or from overseas who are trying to get a job here in the United States remotely, from at least my knowledge, it's pretty difficult, like extremely difficult, just because of all the guidelines, procedures that have to be done. Um, it's extremely difficult, and I will also just say I'm not the most informed about the exact process of it. I will say though, from the people I know who are overseas trying to work here in the United States, or even if they are in the United States right now, um, it's unfortunate. It's really difficult for situation for anyone who is overseas trying to work in a different country, whether you're trying to work in the UK, or you're trying to work, or if you're in the US trying to work elsewhere. Like it's just extremely difficult. I feel that's what I've noticed in international markets. I feel international markets are way more difficult, even in the United States. So I definitely have lots of sympathy for that. Um, but yeah, I really think that working remotely internationally is extremely difficult, and I know people who have. It's just that it's a super unique situation, and I feel a lot of times if you get in with the company first and then in time hopefully find that there's opportunity in the future, that's the best way. And that's kind of what I tell people too, is regardless, like if you're having a tough time landing the job you want, and this is like this is not ever plan A, this is like plan Z, like worst case. This is the situation I put myself in. I told myself like, okay, like as a teacher, I'm able to pay my bills and live on with my life, but I can't keep doing this. Like I can't do it forever. I can't keep looking for a data job for over a year and still mentally be in it. Like there's no way. So I'm like, okay, if I don't get a data job, if I'm trying my best and I don't get a job for another 6 months, then I'm like, okay, what do I do? Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to land a job. I'm going to try to get a job at a company I really want to be at. And then in time, in like a year or two, apply internally and move my way up into a data role. That's what I've seen a lot of people do recently. And that's kind of like what I'm suggesting. If it comes to that personal situation, if you're in a situation where I need a job in general, then okay. Like for example, Cigna has a ton of jobs that are more customer service related or operations related that do involve some Excel, sometimes a little bit of PowerPoint, but it's not very technically driven. But if you spend some time in that job after a year, you could easily move anywhere internally because Cigna is a massive company. I was looking, so I referred to someone the other day and they asked, like, oh, how many jobs are available? I'm like, if you look at every single job that's available at my company, internally and externally, there's around 900 openings. So, and of course, if you're looking internally, that can only help it being, you're already in the company, you're already know in and outs of parts of it. It's much easier to move a candidate internally than bring someone externally. So understand too that if you're in a position where you're looking for a while, you feel like you're doing the right things, you feel like you have the right projects, the right resume, and just feel like it's just not something's not clicking, then focus on a company. Get in with the right company and then work your way upward. Like I was very prepared to do that. I was very prepared to take a job at Bank of America and like the finance. As I said before, I was big in the financial companies. So like Bank of America, TD Bank, Citibank. I was prepared to take a job in that sector, and then in time get that corporate experience, and then work my way up into a different department. I was ready to do that because one, it was going to pay me better than my teaching job, and two, I probably could work remote. So it's more just understanding of your situation, what you could handle, what are you willing to do? Because at the same time, that advice might not work for some people. Some people who are, let's say, making decent money in a job. Some people who are making 100K plus who are like, I can't just, you know, take a data job that pays 70 out of nowhere. I need this, I need that. I'm like, like I get it. But at the same time, in a year or two, I jumped around 35,000 in a year or two. And I'm not saying that's everyone's situation, but once you get experience, it definitely makes a massive, massive difference. So really understand that, as I've said before, understand your necessities. If you're telling yourself like, hey, I need a day job, or, I only want a data job, like, okay, that's not my opinion to make. That's all if that's 100% what you want, that's fine. But I always recommend to people that if, have that extra plan on the side. Like, hey, if I'm doing everything I can and it's just not clicking and not working, what else can I do? And you never know what could happen. You get into that company you want, put your time in, do a great job, get on their job board online. Like Cigna's got an amazing job board. Get on there and look internally. You can apply to whatever you want. And as long as you have that, background in that company and that corporate background, it helps you a lot more than having no experience and applying it externally. So lots of different ways with that. It's just that it's always think long term. Like I'm 28 years old. I always try to tell myself like, yes, I wish things could happen a lot quicker than they do. But if I, spend about a year putting in something, putting in a little bit of work, then looking internally, like, okay, at that rate, I'll be 29 and, my career's set. Then I'm set. I get my day job a year later. It doesn't matter. Like, okay, like I'd rather make sure that I do the right things to set myself up for the rest of my life, pay a little bit of my dues now, put time into a job for 6 months to a year, and then I could have the rest of my career set. I'll take that any day of the week. So it's really just come down to you and your mentality and what you're willing to give up or what you're willing to not give up. As long as you have that set, it really depends on your situation with that. One other question someone mentioned on LinkedIn that definitely got my attention. And they always talk about the technical skills and like, what do I have to learn? What do I have to do? And there's so many ways you could, not there's so many ways. It depends on how you approach it. Some people are like, oh, like you got to learn the technical skills like Excel, SQL, and this. Or like, oh, you got to learn how to know business problems and this. Like you could approach it in many different ways. The problem I see, not that I feel like I'm speaking like I'm a person that has 15 years of experience here. I'm just talking from people that I've been talking to who are trying to break in, is that they're always so focused on, I got to make projects. I'm learning this in Excel. I'm doing this in SQL. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. How long have you been looking for a job? And they tell me usually it's like, yeah, I've been looking for 4 months, 5, 6. I'm like, okay. So why are you continuing to do so much learning? And they're like, oh, well, I want to make sure like I'm set or making better projects. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I get that. But there's only so much more you can improve on until you get that first job. Once you get that first job, that's where you really will enhance your skills to much different heights. Like there's only so much because you don't know exactly 100% what goes into the job. You can read all you want, you can watch videos, do all that stuff, but until you get on the job, you don't realize how complex some of this work could really be. So I tell them like, okay, your effort should be on just getting interviews. Yes, you can learn on the side, make projects. Of course, if your projects could be improved, yeah, just do it on the side. But don't spend a ton of time still learning and learning and learning. The technical skills are not going to, they're just a small part. You also got to be good at interviewing. You have good soft skills. You got to make sure you're good with networking. Like it's a small part of the formula. So just because you know Power BI really good or Tableau or SQL will not guarantee you're going to get the job. I got my first job. I barely knew how to do joins in SQL. I know for a fact it was because of my technical abilities. And I know it's not everyone's situation, but just because you're good at something, whether it be technical, does not mean you will get the job. You have to have good personality. Gotta know how to talk. But like, it's just so much goes into it. And I think that once people can understand that just knowing the technical skills are such a small part is just it's just so like anyone can realistically anyone can learn Excel, SQL, Tableau, Power BI. Technically, anyone can learn it, right? But if you're going for a job that has 300 applications and everyone has similar projects, Excel, SQL, this, that, it's like, okay, clearly it's not a technical problem. Like, technically, everyone can do it. It's like, okay, but what else can we look at? Their resume? Are they in the right location? Is it well formatted? Do we understand what's going on? Three, like you're interviewing, you kind of great technical abilities, but they bring you in for an interview and you're a total robot and you come off cold and you're like, okay, this person is not a good fit for our team from a personality standpoint. Like, just because you have a million projects or you're really good at SQL does not separate you that much when it comes to getting an interview. It's much, much more than just technical skills. I just want people to know that. Come from a person who, it definitely took a little bit longer to get to where I'm at with my technical skills, but that's only after a year. Like, I'm excited to see what's going to look like in 2 or 3 years. Like, I'm really excited to see that growth. But you just got to do enough to get an interview, and just having the technical skills is like 20% of what could get you an interview. Good question, Emily. So, just join stream. How many projects do you recommend having ready when you apply? Good question. There's no set answer, but I'll give my opinion. I recommend 3 to 4. And how I do this is gonna be a video I'm gonna make probably in a couple weeks from now. When you put together your portfolio, that if you do 3 to 4 projects like I recommend, it usually goes something like this. I like to always make projects that go start to finish. You're not just going in there, typing in SQL code and calling out a project. If you want to do that, it's fine. That's a SQL cleaning project. But I like to show projects that are more realistic, kind of starting off with raw data in Excel. You're either cleaning that in Excel, then you're probably going to query some of that in SQL, dive more into it, and you're going to visualize that using Tableau, Power BI, or like I really don't have much knowledge of Python. Like, I know how it works. I have it downloaded, but I don't really use it that much. So depending on if you're using Python instead of SQL, maybe use Python or whatnot. I like to show the transformation process where it starts from the very beginning, clean the data to what we want. We dive into it using SQL or Python. You can make visuals in Python too. And at the very end, we make a dashboard on the message you're trying to show. And I think that, yes, it takes a lot more work than just making like a dashboard for a project or this and that. But if you can show that transformation from beginning to end, that's very realistic. That is exactly what you do on the job. And I think it also gets to show off your thinking of why you're deciding to clean this, why are we visualizing this, why are we looking into this in SQL. I think if you could document that well and explain your process with that, 3 to 4 is plenty. Like, if anyone I talk to, I work on them with usually about 3 projects. I think with 3, it's enough to show off your analytical skills, critical thinking abilities. And if you want to add in a 4th one, you can. That's on your own time. Or if you want to do a 4th one that's only Tableau or only SQL, like, that's fine. But I think having 3 overall projects from beginning to end using 2 or more tools is a great use to your portfolio. That's what I recommend to people. Because I'm still looking for a day job. I'm just thinking that's why I'm like hard. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's tough. It's always tough because, like, when it comes to giving out like information, right? I tell people all the time, when people ask for my opinions on things, I'm one person. I'm doing this for about a year. It's from my experiences, right? You could ask someone else who's been doing it for a year. You might get a different answer. You might ask someone who has 5 years experience, might get a different answer. Like everyone might have a different answer, right? But at least from my experiences going through 2 job searches in the last year, projects are they're useful if they're high quality. Like if you have 3 high quality projects, that's all you need. You don't have to do anything else with your portfolio. If you have 7, 8 projects, but they're all like okay, then you're not helping yourself out, really. Like you really gotta think about like I have about 7, 8 projects I could put in my portfolio, but I have 3. I tell myself, and you're gonna have better projects. You're gonna have some better ones, and you're gonna have some worse ones. That's just how it is, right? Like I have some projects I feel like really connected with, and some that are not. It's just how it is. That's just how it is. So I tell myself, okay, like what are the top 3 projects I want to show off? And I put that like on my resume. Maybe I'll keep a few more in my actual portfolio, but I'm okay. Like I have my top 3. I need to make these the best they possibly could be, the best they could be. As long as I do that, what more could I do? Like you got to trust yourself. You got to trust like what you did. Like because if you're gonna keep making them and making them and making them, usually not everyone, but usually that means that you don't feel like you know enough or you don't trust yourself enough. And if you don't trust yourself enough, well then that's how your portfolio will look how it is. Like there's lots of people I've met with who have like 7, 8, 9, 10 projects in there, and I look at them and I'm like, you have like respectfully probably one really good one, and the rest are just okay. So you really should take some time to make at least a few of them the best they could be, and just show those off. Like just do that. It's not about the quantity. It's about having at least 3 high quality projects in there. Because everything else you can do on side, you can learn on side, practice SQL, and then you can enhance your projects as you go. That's fine, but you don't need to make more. You can just enhance. So think about that. Like make them, and as time goes on, enhance them. The more you learn, go back, make changes. Oh, I learned this in Tableau. Let me make this change in my chart now. Like that's fine. That's a good approach. But you don't have to make complete new ones every single time. You're gonna drive yourself insane. And 2, that's just probably maybe not the best use of your time. That's in my honest opinion. How long do you think you need to spend on a project to make it good? First one I put a ton of work on. It was okay. The second one I did in a day. Now, there's no like it depends on so much about like time. It really will depend on the data you're working with. If the data you're working with is decent and it's clean and you're able to analyze it, it's not that bad. If you pick a data set and it's an absolute disaster, I mean, I've done so many projects where I clean it in Excel, I get the SQL, and I get the Tableau, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't look good. Like these visuals don't. I feel like I can't really show it off visually. And it's not like every single time you do a project, it has to be that way, right? You could do a project that's in Excel and SQL, and that's it. But I really like data visualization. I really like working with Tableau. Was my number one tool at my first job, so I had a lot of hands-on time with that. But realistically, like time-wise, I don't really know. I don't know. I think like if you have like this could be this may just like make up a rant on because I try not to put time frames on projects. Like 8 to 10 hours is typical. 8 to 10 because like I said, if you have your data set, I'll probably talk about this a little bit right here, but you pick out your data set, you write down questions you're trying to answer in the data set just by looking at it. Look at the columns, see what the data really is trying to tell you, and just initially have some like general questions you want to answer. It's gonna help you a lot when you get into SQL, just so you know what you're looking for. I spent about 8 to 10 hours on the ones the ones on YouTube I made. Those are more in like real time. So like the one I just did were split into 3 videos that took about 2 hours for me to do. But of course, they took 2 hours because I knew going into it an idea of what I wanted to do, and I knew the data a little bit. So it took 2 hours for me to do it. If I didn't know it that well, it probably would have taken five, six, a little bit. Um, I want to make sure that most of the time, if you can really plan out your project in the beginning, you plan out the type of questions you want to answer. What are some insights you think we could get out of it? And then once you do that in SQL, make it to Tableau or Power BI, start sketching out your dashboard. How should my dashboard look? What are the type of charts I want to use? What are the KPIs I want to show off? If you could really plan your analysis and your visualization before you do it, you will be fine when you get to the technical part. The technical part actually should be the quickest part. The planning part, you're planning the questions, the steps of how you're going to do your analysis, what your dashboard should look like. If you do that, when you get to the technical part, really, like I said, answering SQL and then making your dashboard, that's not that. It you might run into issues, right? You might run into an issue on SQL and be like, hey, I don't know how to type this. Let me use ChatGPT real quick or go on Google or whatnot to figure it out. Like that happens, but you have a direction where you're going. If you go into a project and you just don't really, you're just doing it to do it, and you're just typing in SQL code to just type it in, like, or you're making charts to do charts, like you're gonna run into a lot of problems, and it's gonna look bad. It will look bad. Like your dashboard, I can guarantee, especially from a data visualization perspective, if you just make charts, and just throw it around everywhere, like then it's gonna look bad. There's gonna be no direction to what you're doing. You're just going to you see a bunch of charts like, oh, I see a donut chart, bar chart, line chart. Like, okay, well, what's the point of it? What are we doing here, right? It's more than just going in, typing in code, and making charts. Like making sure everything you're doing, you're using SQL to understand the data a little bit more. You're trying to do some different, measurements, calculations that Excel can't do, and then getting into visualization. You're trying to tell a story behind it. Like, what are you trying to prove? What are we doing here? If it's like like a sales data set, okay, you should be making charts and visualizations that are more focused on, try and prove, okay, just think about sales. You're trying to do the two things. You're trying to increase profit or decrease cost. So you have to make up charts that show that information off. If, let's say, you're doing a data set on a hospital and their intake patients, you're trying to really understand, do you see a correlation between age and what they're coming in for? Are certain days of the week the best? Are we short staffed on nurses and doctors? Like, those are the kind of things you want to look for. And then that comes out through your SQL queries and your dashboard. It's more than just making random charts and stuff. Making sure you have a plan of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Your project will look fantastic at the end. Not even just visually and code wise, but like when you explain it in your portfolio through your summary section, it's gonna be a great project and it's gonna be very realistic and relatable to anyone who's gonna view it. So yeah, there's no, like, for the time, 8-10 hours is probably good, but that's if you know what you're gonna be doing. If you know ahead of time your analysis and what you kind of want your dashboard to look like. Um, you got you got offer? Oh my god, that's amazing. I don't Feel free to reach out to me on, because I only see your username here, but definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat to see more about this. I really appreciate um LinkedIn posts have been continue my motivation and job. That dude, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Like I said, I've talked about this a little bit on like LinkedIn, but I'm not really a big social media person. I like to stay to myself a lot. Um, so definitely get on LinkedIn. Last year, not really having any connections, anything at all. Um, was a little scary. Putting yourself out there, posting, commenting, and no one really responding to you or anything like that. It was tough, but I mean, I'm so happy to see people find my posts helpful in any way, and I appreciate you guys giving me that platform to get on there and try to teach. That's one thing I love is I used to be a teacher, and I love to do anything to help people and teach anyone about my experiences or anything like that. And if I can help even one person, that just helps me keep going with everything I do. So yeah, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn if we're connected and shoot me a message. I'd love to chat more about your experience and stuff like that. I really appreciate that. Um, what do I like more about Tableau versus Power BI? Yeah, so that's another good question. Both my jobs I've used Tableau. So I'm going to come at this. It might be a little bit biased because of my own experiences. I have used Power BI. I do have a Windows PC here, and I have done some projects in Power BI because I do just want to learn it and understand it. I haven't used it in a production setting, but I will say they both have pros and cons. With Power BI being able to use Power Query and some of the aspects in there is something I wish that I could use more, because I think Power BI is definitely more user friendly, and I think it's a very powerful tool, especially with data modeling and cleaning. I think it's amazing with that. Tableau, there is a little bit more of a learning curve with it. It definitely is not so straightforward compared to Power BI, especially because Power BI is a Microsoft tool, and I think a lot of people have experience using Word, Excel, PowerPoint. So understanding the interface and how things work is pretty familiar for some people. Um, Tableau, it definitely there's a learning curve, and most people I know when they start working on Tableau, it definitely takes them a little bit longer to get through it compared to things like SQL or Excel. Um, but it's an amazing visualization tool. Like the visuals that come out of Tableau are amazing. It's extremely powerful. It just takes a little bit more time to learn. And also, what I like about Tableau is if you're trying to create a portfolio, it's really easy to share your work. Really easy. You have your own profile. You can share it, download workbooks, download images of it. Yeah, it's super good for beginners and trying to show off their portfolio. I think Tableau is the best, and I do recommend people choosing Tableau, and that has probably come from a bias standpoint, but I always find that people who know Tableau could learn Power BI very easily, and people going from Power BI to Tableau, it there definitely is a little bit of a learning curve there. So both are great. If both my companies Power BI, I'd probably say Power BI is better to use, but like I said, I try to work on Power BI every once in a while so I get better with it. I do want to do more content in the future with it, but I want to make sure that anything I put out there is of use and not me just making generic, random Power BI videos, just to make them. But I encourage you to kind of look into both. Like I said, I would recommend Tableau learning first, and then do a little bit of Power BI on the side. But like I said, that's just my opinion from my experiences here. Um, so we got a little bit more time. I did want to also talk about, I guess you're still around. For especially this channel, what I have coming up soon is I want to start doing a sequel series where it's going to be more. It's gonna be kind of like taking a course, like you would on like a website like Udemy or Coursera. However, it'll be right here on YouTube. I like to think my teaching style is more. I like to apply a little bit on learning the topic. Let's say you're in SQL, you're trying to learn CTEs. I think it's always good to watch a video, do one together, but I really like to implement the practicing aspect. So I think a lot of things what I want to do is teach it, but also do a few examples for each part of SQL that you're learning. Because I really think that that's how I taught when I was, even though I was teaching fifth, sixth graders. That's how I taught. I taught a little bit, but I want to implement a lot of practice with it. That's just how the way I learn. I'm a visual learner, so I feel like if I see it once or twice, I want to then get pretty hands on with it. So that's how I approach a lot of things. That's why with my project videos, I try to make sure I show every single thing I'm doing. And that's how I like to operate with a lot of things I do. I mean, playing baseball. Baseball is a sport where you practice and do the same thing over and over and over. You improve and then move on to something else. Practice it a little bit, repeat over and over, and then you're done. That's how I want to do with anything I do with SQL. I eventually want to do an Excel series too. So anything with that will be definitely much more practice oriented than learning. So that's just definitely how I approach things. Um, I should mention in my interview that kept up with the latest trends. Awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, for sure. Definitely hit me up. I'd love to chat more about your experiences and learn about that. I think it's super cool. I love seeing people get data jobs because, like I said, coming from my personal situation, coming from most of my life being in jobs that were all but helping others more than myself. I think it was good to be finally put myself first. Put myself, you know what? I've been putting a lot of jobs, being in education and being in sports training. I'm always helping others, but you know what? I won't put myself first. I want to be a little bit selfish. So I think that, landing my job, like, you know what? Either I have a decision. I could just stay with myself or try to be there and help others do the same. And I think seeing people get data jobs is by far one of the best things. That I see on a daily basis. So that's so awesome to see that. Can you suggest some websites to apply for data analyst for freshers? That's good. I get asked that a lot about websites. To be honest, very honest, I've only looked at jobs on LinkedIn just because I just find the easiest, especially with like LinkedIn. I mean, you could find a job and then you could find people who work at a company, network right there, and then it's all in one place. Um, there is, oh my gosh, there's one website. There are, let me see if I can find it. It's a website that it basically focuses on startups. I find that a lot of websites are, I mean, yeah, like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, all those like main websites are just they're all the same kind of. Um, here it is. Here it is. I will copy and paste this into here. Let's see. Does this work like this? There you go. So yeah, that's a website, and I don't like I said I do a lot of things on just LinkedIn. I found all my jobs through like LinkedIn and stuff like that, whether it be um, in the job search or looking for posts. But that is a website that's more startup focused. So there's not as many on there because, of course, it is more startup focused. But you can look remote. You can look up by location. It's definitely a great website to look for some postings that might not make it onto LinkedIn. So that's a great website to use for that. And yeah, of course, yeah, Dennis, no problem. And Julie, yeah, yeah, that's what I say earlier. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Julie. The posts because if you really and um actually, it was a video I made like last week where I went through an example of finding data analyst jobs for the criteria I was looking for. And for me being in the United States, I just typed in, remote data analyst hiring. And I was able to find posts. And I found a post by someone who's over in Utah. Even though it said it was a senior analyst, but it was a remote, I saw the job. I could have applied for it. And I went through like a message I was sending the person. So there's much more things out there besides just what you see on the job listings. And make sure you go find people's posts because, of course, if someone made a post and they only did it like a day or so ago, like they're looking for someone. They literally put on their own personal page. Like, yes, I'm looking for an employee for this job. I need someone for this position. They are opening themselves up for messages. So that makes it to me way easier. Just also mentally, like, okay, like it's not gonna feel so weird. Like this person literally posted that they're looking for an analyst. So yeah, I should message the person. And there's no dancing around this. So it's definitely like the hidden job market that I always tell people to do because, I mean, it's there. It's just there's not as many. It's like also with that website I sent. There's not gonna be as many posts with that, but of course that not a lot of people are doing that. Not a lot of people are going in to look for those postings as much. Um, so yeah, Julia, perfect. Yeah, like I said, I think that's what I tell. That's one of the first things I help people do when they're starting to search is definitely look through posts, try to connect people that way. Um, that's definitely the most unique, helpful way to also get some experience networking. Get to meet some people, whether it works out or not. Get a lot of experience too doing it that way. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna give like another minute, and then if not, I'm gonna wrap this up. But like I said, I plan on doing a live stream Q&As, not so much, probably like once every couple months because like I said, I do get a lot of questions that come in through LinkedIn, and I um, definitely it's extremely difficult to answer lots of the questions. Not because I don't want to, it's just extremely difficult to handle the messages. And also LinkedIn is really, really bad for messaging. So I like to try to do these I want to now do these once every month or two to try to answer some of the questions I see that come in very often, or answer any of you guys questions that come up in here. Like I said, every 2 weeks I want to do a live stream, and whether I be doing a project live together with you guys, or I want to be doing some more like a podcast. If I want to do like a podcast filming live, it'll be something different every couple weeks. But I definitely want to do something that gets back to that, because I do enjoy doing live content. It definitely makes it feel way more realistic, not so edited and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, so I think I'm going to wrap that up here. So I appreciate you guys hanging out for the hour. If you have any other questions, feel free to afterwards. You could comment on this. You try to find me on LinkedIn, and I appreciate you guys hanging around. See you guys around.